Look at that, right on schedule, 2 p.m. Pacific time here in Los Angeles, where the sun is shining. Beautiful Southern California skies, a regular occurrence around these parts. How's everyone doing? Is everyone feeling okay? I got the chat up on Substack. I am streaming on YouTube and X as well. Although I maybe I can see those chats through my streaming thing. I don't know. But anyways, I am paying attention to the Substack chat. There's so much to talk about. I'm kind of, today was like one of these days where, I mean, I could just like, I'm like, I have like two or three more essays in me, just based on all the things I'm seeing. But I know I overwhelm people. When I, do daily writing benders and spend 8 or 9 hours just putting stuff out. But it's a catharsis for me, right? Get out my feelings through writing. But anyways, yeah, we did one of these yesterday, and we talked about some things. And I mean, the thing about this moment that I find like really really palpable, right, is that people talk about like vibe shifts. And there certainly has been something that one could describe as a vibe shift, I think, right? The election results on Tuesday night, I think we're a shot in the arm, right, for the opposition. People feeling somewhat hopeful, right, that people can be convinced about the reality of our situation. But there's some dangers there as well that we need to talk through. But I've been really just trying to pay attention to the commentariat, right? I mean, I must have spent, I don't know, like at this point, like 16 hours over the last 48 hours, really just kind of going in and out of different bubbles of commentary. Progressive, Young Turks, and Fox News, Destiny, right? The sort of the streaming, so the streamer community, the streamer political community, looking at all these like different ways in which this moment is being interpreted. And I think like one of the things that's notable about this moment, right? We talk a lot about the sort of the fractured lack of the fracture of shared reality, right, around us. I call it the epistemic crisis. So do other philosophers and sociologists and such. But I think like what's interesting about this moment, and for me, um, I mean, I'm actually quite hopeful about this moment, right? We've demonstrated something that that I think a lot of people sort of intuitively came to believe wasn't true, which is that if that people are not capable of perceiving reality absent like gatekeepers and sort of the controlled distribution of information. So I think there's a lot of people on the left that have this fear, right, that with Elon Musk in control of X and Starlink and Alex Karp and with his Palantir and Peter Thiel and all these potential systems of surveillance and control, that like one of the sort of the fears is that they just are able to control the information environment so completely that this narrows the capacity for resistance, and you have this sort of this existential fear that we've lost, essentially, that this is a fait accompli. And it's not, because as I wrote in a piece yesterday, that piece is performing better than I thought it might, actually. But where I sort of frame this as the simulation collapsing. What do I mean by simulation? I mean, it's obviously like a euphemism, right, for the narrative environment that most of us sort of understand the world in, right? Be it through the algorithmic media, TikTok, Fox News, CNN, whatever sort of like narrative space that you're in, there's this sort of palpable like disruption that's happening right now, that none of these narratives make sense. Everyone's mad about it. You see it in the polls, right? People don't trust the media, they don't trust the government, they don't trust politicians. That's because that's because the narrative environment that they're in doesn't match the real, their lived experience, if you will. And we've reached a point now where certain things are breaking through, and some of this just comes down to the fact that these I mean these fascists have like overreached, and it's sort of, and one of the things that I think that will be sort of said and understood when historians look back on this moment. And look, I don't know how this is going to turn out, guys. I'm not saying democracy is saved. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, like, I don't think Donald Trump is the final boss here. I mean, we got people like Tucker Carlson and stuff coming down the pipeline. I mean, we have some scary politics ahead. Don't like get, too triumphalist in this moment. Donald Trump is still president. JD Vance is still in the line of succession. This is all true. We must remind ourselves of this. But what we can do in this moment is attach ourselves to a very important observation. George Orwell talked about this. Hannah Arendt and Václav Havel. In his sort of commitment and invitation and demand that we live in truth, is that like propaganda, it's very powerful, and it can confuse people, it can sedate people, it can depoliticize people. All this stuff is true, but it has limits. When the president's telling you that prices are falling while you keep noticing that the total line item on your receipt at the grocery store is higher every week, that's something that is difficult for the propagandists to argue around. And you get, I wrote a piece about Laura Ingraham, and the way she framed the election win for the Democrats on Tuesday night as an actual loss for them, and that's where you see, like, that's the essence, right, of the nature of these positions, like showing themselves in this almost like hilarious, like comedic way, this tragic comedy that we're all living in the middle of. So this is the message, right? That resistance is always possible, right? Resistance is always possible. It's possible for our friends in China, right? Who wish to experience democracy. It's possible in North Korea. It's possible in Russia. The Ukrainians are bravely fighting for that possibility in the eastern regions of their country. And so, this moment is something that the opposition should absolutely feel good about. We should absolutely celebrate. And we're being shown something, right, that is very important. And that is the fact that these cancer cells on our collective project of self-government that are spoon feeding us, ultra processed propaganda garbage, are finding themselves pushed further and further outside, the cultural zeitgeist. They thought they owned the culture, right? Like this just triumphalism of MAGA, right? Like the anger that Bad Bunny was chosen to headline the Super Bowl halftime show next year, and like this, like their brains exploded. I mean, and they were so mad because they thought this small group of people that actually don't represent anywhere close to a majority of Americans believed that they were the new trendsetters, that they were the new commissars of the culture. And what we're now seeing is, in their attempt to, consolidate that cultural victory, it has all basically, fallen, like it slipped between their fingers. It's all falling away, and this is, this is a moment of great realization that resistance is possible, that human decency remains, it survives, that beneath all this noise and all this insanity, that democracy still breathes, even as it's fighting. And it is fighting. We're in a war. We're in a war for democracy, not just here, but around the world. And today is and the last few days is a reminder that victory is possible, just as it was in the past. Anyways, one of the things that has been I've sort of noticed in my world, as I just over a year ago, I was an executive in Silicon Valley, and a lot of people in my network, in my professional network, and friends are in that world. And what I'm doing, right, obviously hasn't like escaped those people, right? You can imagine, you've got this, their former colleague has got this Substack, and he's writing pretty incendiary stuff about his former industry. And I about 3 days ago, I got a series of messages from a former colleague. And I'm not gonna throw him under the bus. I'm not gonna say his name, but it was something that, like, I found, like, really psychologically insightful about, like, how certain people in the in the part of the political economy they find themselves, how they're sort of thinking about things. And it was sort of suggested to me that what I'm doing is essentially, these aren't his words, this is my synthesis of his words, and what he was trying to appeal to me was that I'm sort of demagoguing tech. I am whipping up popular hatred against Silicon Valley figures, and that what I'm doing is dangerous, and that it's divisive, and it makes it really, really hard, for certain people who used to respect me, to maintain sort of a connection to me, because what I'm doing, the way that I'm pointing fingers, the way that I keep pointing out the fact that Tim Cook, I mean, it looks to me like he paid something that looks like a bribe in the Oval Office with the cameras rolling in exchange for tariff relief on the iPhones. And that kind of like rhetoric is alienating, that like I should understand that people are in a really tough position. Like, Trump is the president, business is business, nothing is personal. And that, like, what I'm doing is like something that's dangerous. I'm doing a dangerous thing. And I'm not being fair to people who are making tough decisions under exceptional circumstances. I agree that everyone's making tough decisions under exceptional circumstances, and I think those decisions matter a lot. And I think that the decisions that people make in a moment like this, at a period of you know uh, of democratic crisis, and political emergency in the country. I think I agree with that, but that makes it all the more important that the decisions that you make are attached to some modicum of moral fidelity, uh, and loyalty to the institutions of democracy and the rule of law, um, and not just our cynical calculations of money and power. I mean, I have no respect for that. And I think there's too many people in our society that think that that money and power are the two things on which any pragmatic calculation ought to be made. I don't agree, right? I don't agree. Like I'm a small L liberal, small D Democrat. Um, and the that's and then in the political system that our Constitution lays out, is certainly concordant with that, and that's why I got an American flag right here. Look at this right there, patriotic American over here, defending those constitutional principles. I don't acknowledge that there's this private sector that sits alongside this public sector, and that these are parallel estates. I believe that we are a society, we are a nation, we are bound together by law, that these laws at both the federal and the state level, are, like create the architecture of everything from property rights to incorporation that creates the liability structures that enable these private businesses to exist. And that these things are all interconnected. They are not parallel, like independent estates. And that is how a lot of these people in Silicon Valley view it. And this is why you see this in the crypto community and the Bitcoin community. They are trying to build parallel institutions that exist outside that structure. And I do have to tell you, with all seriousness, that these people, in many cases, fully understand that who Donald Trump is, and fully understand the ways in which the institutions of the federal government work, and are very much trying to collapse the United States from within. Many people, there's many people talking about this. I've written about this. I wrote a piece, like the plot against America, but like you don't even have to like take my word for it, right? They have people like Curtis Yarvin and Balaji Srinivasan that are actually just like saying the quiet part out loud, that they want to build societies that exist in this pure sort of like neo-feudalist realm that's beyond the reach of the laws of any nation state or country. And some of these people, most of them, are principals. I mean, I think Alex Karp, the head of Palantir, is one of these. Peter Thiel is certainly one of these. That really buys into this Yarvinist idea that democratic control of capital is illegitimate, that taxation is theft, that all property rights are sort of these natural rights that emerge from this concept of self-ownership. They have this intellectual lineage that runs back to this guy by the name of Murray Rothbard, that and that is built on top of like Ludwig von Mises's praxeology. This idea, this natural rights theory, essentially that feudalism and monarchy are the natural order of things, and that democracy was always a lie. And they rely on critiques from like the Italian school, right? The iron law of oligarchy. They have all these arguments. I'm familiar with all of them, and those of you who've read most of my stuff over the last year know that I've spoken about a lot of this stuff at length and critiqued it in detail. But like you do need to know that these people think like this. And the thing that needs to be said, right, is that like they have like overreached here, right? Like people more and more people recognize this. They recognize that this is this is a thing. I mean, Steve Bannon recognizes this. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene recognizes this. Laura Loomer recognizes this. This is actually like one. This is actually not that any of these people are, people that I would celebrate. But like even within the sort of the populist right, there's this recognition that you've got these techno fascists that essentially want to rule everything as feudalist monarchs. And so they are, the good news is they're kind of like surrounded, right? While I'm certainly no, ally of Steve Bannon, right? I at least think it's fun and useful that even some of my political enemies recognize that these Silicon Valley feudalists, economic royalists, whatever you want to call them, are there and are aware of their plans and their designs. And they know they're losing, right? I mean, Curtis Yarvin, some people were laughing at the fact that he's, talking about needing to leave the country before 2028. So, I mean, drink your Schadenfreude while I take a actual sip of coffee. But I mean, I also think that it's really important, and I mean, I have like former friends who think like this, by the way, right? That I would, I'm having like sometimes just like this ethical quandary of like, trying to be decent to people who I have relationships with, most of which are frayed at this point. I mean, like many of my former colleagues think I have like Trump derangement syndrome. But it's been interesting to watch the sort of the progression of some of these people who at one point were very much anti-Trump and then ended up like taking a knee and sort of like rejoicing in the emergence of this new golden age of crypto and deregulated commerce. And you can just see, right? Like some of them are just like, well, I don't want anything to do with politics anymore. I'm just going to sit back and wait for it to collapse. And that's like that's part of it. But there's going to be, I mean, crypto is like mostly crime. Like, I'm not saying it's like all crime, but it's like mostly, right? I mean, like in some sense. And I think that the truth is that these people are the party. I mean, they should enjoy it while it lasts, because I do think that justice is coming. I don't know like how that will take shape, but I do think that that's going to happen. Anyways, my former friends in Silicon Valley who think I'm demagoguing them. Yeah, I mean, I just don't, I wouldn't, if I had been in a situation, if I was CEO and my board of directors told me to prostrate myself before Donald Trump and offer him, 24 karat gold bar, in order to obtain concessions on import tariffs, I would have told them to go fuck themselves and find another CEO personally. That's what I would have done. I I think that I just don't I don't countenance this idea that that business is this just this amoral thing that should just like adapt to whatever political condition exists. I mean, this is a constitutional republic, and um, if a president is engaged in crime, which our president is, and your calculation is, well, we're a business, we're not into politics, we're just gonna crime too if that's what we have to. That's just that. I obviously, like, you can throw around words like sedition, people will bristle at me and talk about like the legal definition of it, but like, it's morally seditious, I think, right? That's like morally seditious. Right? If you believe in sort of the idea of having sort of loyalty to the Constitution, like if that actually is like something that we think we're sort of ethically and morally bound to, which I do, right? Um, then the American business mogul basically, saying, well, I'm going to participate in these unconstitutional arrangements because that's just like what the office holder is doing. I mean, that's like basically saying I was just following orders. We didn't accept that argument at the Nuremberg trials, and I don't think we should accept that argument this time. I think these people have proven themselves to be morally inadequate to the moment. I think that and I know there's like centrists and moderates that are like fucking their heads are exploding right now. They're like, Mike, like we can't be like throwing everyone in jail, right? When like there's got to be like truth and reconciliation. But I think the opposition right now needs to be very fucking clear that like we see you paying these fucking bribes, we see you like prostrating yourself and taking a fucking knee and helping this like increasingly illegitimate government um uh deny the constitutional rights of its citizens, and we are just simply we're simply not going to let you get away with that, right? We're gonna take back Congress, and then we're gonna fucking subpoena you. We're gonna drag you before Congress, and we're gonna invite the media in, and we're gonna ask you some really tough questions before the American people. I think we need to subpoena Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg when the Democrats take back Congress, and like demand that they explain the ways in which they've cooperated with Donald Trump. And when they refuse, and when they plead when they claim executive privilege or whatever it is, then I think Congress needs to enact its inherent contempt power. And I think it needs, and I think they need to. Congress needs to. Congress has the power of arrest. People don't realize this. It hasn't been used. There's a jail in Congress, actually. They can, in fact, like deputize Congress can deputize a sheriff acting on behalf of Congress to go out and arrest somebody. And if the executive branch isn't going to do that, I know a lot of people think that's crazy, but it's happened before, and it's a constitutional power that Congress has. And a lot of people think that's radical and extreme, but like I totally fucking think that's what when the Democrats take back Congress, and it looks like they have a good chance of that, right? With like what's happening, right? Even with all the attempts to rig the election, if those kinds of margins we saw on Tuesday hold up or get worse, like they're not going to be able to stop what's coming next November. And when that inevitably happens, and maybe there's another Jan 6 style thing that happens, them trying to stop this new Congress getting sworn in, who knows what the fuck they'll do. But like when we fight through all of those battles, the Democrats need to use their Article 1 powers at their apex, and that includes using the inherent contempt power. That means literally subpoenaing these fucking oligarchs and dragging them before Congress. And if the U.S. Sheriff's Service doesn't want to do that, then they should. Then the Congress has the power to deputize someone themselves, and that is a power that Congress has. And we need to make a historical example of everybody who went along with this. And I don't apologize for that. And if like my former friends in Silicon Valley thinks that's demagoguing them and that's unproductive, well, I mean, like, then fucking like, then do something right now. Use your power, use your money to stand up for what's right. Because like, I don't accept at all that you're just doing what you have to do. You're going along to get along. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. It's not good enough for my children and my children's children. I'm sorry. It's not good enough. We have lived through fascism before. In the early part of the 20th century, we ended that whole thing. We said, never again to that whole fucking thing. And I fucking believe that we should be morally committed in the year 2025, to the notion that ordinary people can govern themselves and should be given the institutions to enable that. Like that is something that is not up for negotiation. That is something that we must defend, tooth and nail. And all of these people, I mean, these collaborators, these people who've collaborated with the Trump administration in order to bring an end to that idea of self-government and all of their attempts. And you've got fucking the Ellisons who are trying to take over more of the media apparatus in this country. I mean, we see what you're doing. We see what's going on. Like, and look, we like, and what we saw on Tuesday is that we, the people, are coming for you. We're coming. We haven't forgotten what the Constitution says. We haven't forgotten what the U.S. Code says about bribing public officials, about self-dealing, about insider trading. We haven't forgotten any of those things. We remember. And when the opposition takes control of Congress, they need to not just remember those things, but they need to start bringing down the hammer of justice, public hearings, drag these motherfuckers before Congress. And then when we regain control of the White House, prosecute them. And quite honestly, if we should probably anticipate that there'll be massive mass pardons doled out in the ending hours of this regime. Then we get creative. Then we join the International Criminal Court and we ship them to the fucking Hague. I mean, I don't know what we do, but like, I think the stance has to be like, we have not forgotten what is right, what the law says, what the Constitution means, what human decency demands of us. We haven't forgotten that at all. And we're coming for you. We, the people of the United States of America, in pursuit of a more perfect union. That's what I think. Anyways, that's my rant for the today. I'm gonna go to the chat room now, see what people are saying. If you have questions or there's something you want me to focus on, now would be like a good time. some mostly approbation for the things I was saying. Miss H says, "When I reach the end of my life, I want to be able to say I lived a life being proud of." I mean, this sounds like a sort of a trite point, right? Um, but I mean, think about it, right? Um, I'm middle aged now, and you know, I'm like at a point now where I can look back on some things, and I feel really deeply that I missed some opportunities to spend time in ways that you know I I I, I I regret not doing. Um, and I think this sort of frame of thought, right? This sort of like thinking about yourself on your deathbed, right? We're all going to die, right? I mean, we don't like to think about this. Um, but it's the most meaningful event in any human being's life. Both in it's the um, it's the thing, right? That most of us spend most of our lives trying to avoid thinking about, and doing things trying to avoid. But when you think about that, like like where you want to be, um I mean, like that putting yourself there, like being brave enough to sort of put yourself there in that sort of emotionally tough spot, right? It is a place, right, where you know you can sometimes have visibility, into the things that you're doing now, that you don't really think about, but part of you knows you're probably ashamed of. um and we all have these things, like in one way or another, right? Like maybe, for me, right, I think like one of my sins was being like too much of a workaholic, right? When like my kids were growing up, and and I think, yeah, I mean, there's we all have these things, right? And so that sort of that perspective of thinking back, is a good way to sort of check yourself on, like, what should I be thinking about and doing today. um Anyways, what else are people saying? They think they're on, SM Clive says they think they're on the winning side. They threw morality out the window. Yeah, I mean, this much is clear, right? I mean, so like, I think one of the ironies, like the grand ironies of this moment, is that the way in which sort of political discourse and public discourse, civil discourse happens today, right, is on social media, or has been, right? It's increasingly like on Substack now. We'll see how that turns out, right, over the next few years. Um, and in that world, right, the people that we're talking about here, right, these economic royalists, the techno fascists, tech right, these just corrupt oligarchs. I mean, they've sort of trapped themselves in a bubble, right? In an information bubble. So in the same way that, like, a lot of people in other political dispositions are sort of in these filter bubbles, they are too. And like, I think, and you've seen this too, right? Like, I think that there are some Republicans, and you've sort of seen them, like, on social media and stuff, that were genuinely surprised on Tuesday. Like, it just blew their fucking mind that because, like, in the Virginia race, for example, right? Like, the Republicans were running against the trans issue really, really hard. Like, that was what they were going after Abigail Spanberger about. And if you're a Republican within Republican media, your perception of that Virginia election, uh, you know, for the governorship, um, was one in which, like, it was still just a culture war thing, like, about look how out of touch the Democrats are on the trans issue. And Abigail Spanberger, for her part, just like avoided talking about it. And she was just talking about affordability and like Virginia based issues and stuff like that. And she ended up winning in a landslide, biggest landslide in over 30 years in Virginia. And I think for a lot of Republicans, they're really confused by that because they thought that the world that they were seeing, right, the world that like Elon Musk sees fed back to himself by his own algorithm, was one about how ridiculous the Democrats were on the trans issue. And that confused them into like into not understanding that there was just a whole bunch of people out there that are just like completely outside that conversation, that aren't part of that sort of like that MAGA, like bullshit loop. And 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 so they look at this and they're just like, they don't like, the world doesn't make sense right now. And this is why they seem so on their back foot and maybe a little bit scared, right? Like it's scary. Like they're like that is like they trapped themselves inside their narrative bubble that they couldn't even see this resistance rising up against them. And that's like actually like one of the ironies of these systems of control, right? Is when you're building algorithms to control what other people see, you're also building, ultimately you're building a system of control that controls what you see too, right? And because we're filled with biases, with confirmation bias, the availability heuristic, normalcy bias, we tend to self-deceive ourselves. And so, even if they're in control of the algorithm, they still have that really bad human tendency to tune the algorithm for themselves, to tell them a story that they want to hear is true. And that's like one of the reasons, like why, like, for them, like they seem so trapped now. They're like, well, what? They're just like doubling down on certain narratives, on the socialism narrative, on the trans narrative, and they're like, well, wait, but when the national audience sees this, it's all going to be ridiculous. And like they're now going through, I think, like what's going to be for them, I think, a pretty traumatic period of coming to understand that the state of the world as they perceive it isn't quite what it is. And that's true of a lot of people on the left right now as well. What else are people saying? JW Mansour says, mainstream media is not covering Yarvin and his influential nuttiness. Have you thought about appearing on a wide variety of podcast stuff? I mean, it has gotten some media play. I mean, like the New York Times has, gave Yarvin some attention. But I mean, not, he hasn't really, I mean, I don't think quite frankly, that what we need is sort of there to be like 24/7 coverage of Yarvin. I think that, this is an example, I think, right, of the fact that, independent media now is the future, right? I think, right? I think that we're moving more into a world where, say, someone like me, right? Like, I can do most of the things that I need to do, right? With tools, right? We have like, everything from like AI agents to like, these platforms like this that allow us to, do like really force multiply ourselves. And so I think, we're probably like moving into a world where independent media is increasingly more important. And we'll see, how that develops. But I think like in that the fact that like for people who are kind of curious for these sort of deeper narratives that the mainstream media won't cover because they're sort of trapped in their sort of like establishment narratives. I think that in some sense is like one of the reasons why like I think independent media is having a moment. Because like one like if you look at polls, right, like you have like 12% of Americans like trust like media institutions today. It's like insane, right? And so independent media is um in much the same way that populism is having a moment now again on the left, is feeding into a general like discontentment with the sort of the narratives that they're hearing that just don't seem to make sense to them or add up based on their lived experience. And so yeah, I mean, I mean what we're doing now, right? I think is much the future. What else? What else are people saying? Um, I mean, someone's just saying something about getting the younger vote out. I mean, the way I mean, Mamdani did that, right? Mamdani did something that very few politicians have been able to do. Trump is one of them. Bernie Sanders is another one of them. AOC is like another one of them. Like he activated a bunch of people who've never voted for mayor before in New York City, and many of them were young. Uh, I mean, he won 81% of the female vote, and according to exit polls, like that's insane. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, I don't think that, I mean, I don't think there's ever been that much of a gender lopsided vote in a election like that. But I mean, like really, but I mean, it's crazy. And he won, he won really decisively as well among young men in a really, really big way, which was good to see because young men kind of broke for Trump in a big way in 2024. There's a lot of talk about like the crisis of young men. And what Mamdani showed is, I think, actually that he's like a good male role model. I think a lot of the sort of the angry young men that you know feel like beaten up by the culture actually see like a positive role model in Mamdani. And that is, I think, like one of the reasons for like why you're seeing why he played so strongly there. And that's like a really, really good thing. Like we need good role models, like good male role models that are not like fucking Andrew Tate. And I think Mom Donnie's actually like culturally playing that role in addition to being a sort of a generational politician. So that's important. Because I think we need a version of masculinity that is not um, you know, like all about sort of like self-aggrandizement and material gain. Like, we need we need a male, we need a male sort of like set of role models that show that like that grace and courage to stand up for the weak, to protect them against the corrupt and the evil. Like masculinity should be not tied up in sort of notions of I mean whatever it is masculinity has become on the right. And so I think that's like another really underplayed part of why I think Mamdani is such a strong cultural figure. I think our culture is looking for like a modern strong male role model, and I think he's that as well. And in the sort of the political conversation, I think people aren't talking about that. Anyways, almost at an hour now. This one's mentioning the Epstein issue. I mean, I think the Epstein thing is still, before, like, the craziness of the past week. Some of these stories that were showing up in the New York Times. Um, I mean, I wasn't like really like all that into the Epstein conspiracy before, but like some of this stuff that's been kind of dripping out, and the Prince Andrew thing and stuff, and like being stripped of all of his titles and stuff. I'm like really increasingly curious about what's in those files, because it's got to be something fucking insane. um and like it's kind of clear, right, that this is like the real reason why Mike Johnson is keeping Congress closed. Which I mean, like, what do they know that we don't know? Like, you have to think it's just like fucking catastrophic for Donald Trump or his allies, or potentially some Republican members of Congress, or the administration, members of the administration, like whatever it is. It's something that's just like absolutely just like fucking mind-blowingly explosive, just like based on the behaviors of everybody. Um, anyways, um, that's how I'm feeling today, right? Some of my observations, right, from the edge of existence, notes from the circus, presented to you live on this Thursday afternoon from the West Coast of the United States, here in Los Angeles. I think that's going to be it for today. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you again soon.